What's up YouTube? Today I want to have a look at creating full-on morning style gliding leads in Vital. Let's dive in and have a look. So this is the thing that I've created so far, and what I'm going to do is show you guys how recreate the sound from scratch, then show you guys a couple of ways of how to kind of arrange and vary these sounds and a couple of cool ideas for using this type of sound in your tracks. So yeah, this is the sound that we've got so far. Cool, so it's a simple sound, but there's a couple of things that kind of make it special, or that you kind of need to know to get the grasp on these types of sounds. So as you can see, I've kind of got two layers here, but I kind of created them using the same kind of MIDI pattern in mind. And this is a cool way of getting leads to kind of talk to each other, is to kind of like arrange it as a single kind of melody progression, and then divide the notes that are being played by two synths, which are playing similar-ish kind of sounds, but maybe modulating the filters in different ways and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is mute these. We can add a blank instance of Vital over here, and then what I want to quickly do is we can put this MIDI onto this channel. We can just close these off for a while. We can come back to those later. Let's just duplicate this all the way across. So, like I said, I created this MIDI, as a single kind of like progression, and then divided it amongst two parts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to unmute some of these so we can kind of start creating a single kind of progression here. You guys can copy that MIDI if you want to use this in your track. Something to note here is that this kind of sound is very much based on the glide characteristics of a synth. So here, for example, we've got these notes that are overlapping, and this is going to create that kind of sliding, gliding effect between the notes. And then here we've got these two notes that start at the same time, so that gives it like a kind of like glide at the beginning of the note. And then here you can see that there's like, I wanted it to start with this note, so I just got this one to start ever so slightly afterwards, if that makes sense. So just a couple of things that you guys are aware of in the actual melody. This is not exactly on the grid here, this last note. And this is a nice little trick to change the way that the glide characteristics of a synth are working, is by shifting the notes ever so slightly off. Anyway, now that we've got that out the way, so you guys may have noticed the MIDI is in C, and the track I'm writing is not in C. So I'm just going to transpose this down to fit into the track that I'm writing. I think it's -6 should work. Let's have a listen quickly to this MIDI. So it's doing that chord thing, which is not necessarily what we want. So here we've got the voice count polyphony. So this governs how many voices or how many notes in a chord the synth can play at a single time. When you turn it down to one voice, then it sweeps to the next note. Listen to the difference here. And now here, this glide parameter, this governs how long it takes for it to slide from one note to the next. So one of the characteristics of this patch is a slight detune. So I like to do this with this kind of thing. I think it's a little bit simpler for these types of patches to literally just create another oscillator and detune it rather than fiddling with the unison settings, because I don't necessarily want too much of a kind of wide detune sound. I kind of want something that's pretty monocentric, and I'm going to like add effects and distort it, and we can create wideness with reverbs and delays and stuff later on down the chain. So let's add another oscillator. What we can do is we can actually pitch both of these up by 12, so 1 octave, and then we can detune one of these by, let's say 34. Let's try this. with a bit of distortion and some processing, we can really get the sound to start sound pretty good. Here, what I want to do is I want to set up a couple of effects here. Let's use a chorus. We can turn the mix down quite a bit. I want to set this time down quite a lot, so it's quite slow. Let's try some distortion here. I like to sometimes use reverb before distortion. It's kind of no-no, but sometimes it's pretty cool to like get a different tone out of the sound before distorting it. So now the trick here is to kind of, once we've got this kind of like gnarly sound, the trick is to add a high-pass filter after all this distortion and stuff that's happening here. So let's switch this over to high pass, and then let's apply a macro to this cutoff over here. So I should have some automation that I've recorded in here. I wonder if it's copied with... Yeah, it has. So let's just rewrite that. So the distortion in Vital is great, but it doesn't quite push the sound enough for these types of sounds. So I tend to go with Decapitator. That's my favorite for this type of thing. What I want to make sure here, though, is let's just EQ it a little bit before it goes in. Let's just put some delay and reverb on there as well. We're going to turn that off because I want to show you a couple of tricks for varying it up and creating some nice chops and stuff. But just for now, so we can get a kind of like idea of what it's going to sound like in its entirety, we can just slap a reverb and delay on there. We don't have to get too finicky with the settings. So now we can jump in and start fine-tuning some of these settings here, either like in the distortion itself or in the actual synth. We can either change this detune amount. This alters it quite a bit. I like what's sounding here though. So maybe we can change some of this, some of the tone that's coming through from these effects. Now what we can do is we can start looking at splitting it up and creating a kind of talking lead. So where two parts are talking to each other. So what I want to do is, in this part I already prepared that, you know, I kind of know that how it's going to work. But I mean, you can experiment here by muting different parts and seeing what kind of works. But I kind of want to isolate these slides from these wobbles, for lack of a better explanation. Cool, so now what we can do is we can go duplicate, and then on the duplicated one we can jump in there and just kind of select everything with the mute tool enabled, and it just swaps it around like this. Now the trick is to jump in and vary this automation here to get these kind of like, so it sounds like there's two different leads that are playing with each other. So here I think that this filter could come a bit higher, and then we can maybe come down on this variation here. Cool, we got a nice talking groove happening there. So now what we can do is I actually want to jump into each one and just disable the delay and reverb that are happening there. Then we can select both, right click and render in place. Okay, so we have them bounced. Now what we can do is we can drag an instance of that delay and reverb back onto the channel and then copy it over onto the next channel. Now with this slide version here, not the wobble, I like to put a little bit more spatial effects onto these types of things, more delays and reverbs than the other channel, because it kind of like separates them slightly. So let's just give this a bit of boost here and there. So now another really cool thing about or why it's so powerful to render these types of things is because now we can create like glitches and chops. So let's just create, chop these into a piece here. So like here, for example, just before this one, we can do like a double hit. So we can even make variations here for like different sections of the track. So let me just copy this and color it differently, and then we can remove the glitchy parts for maybe a section that we want slightly more minimal. Awesome, that's about it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be posting this preset to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters. So if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time. Cheers.